My name is Michael Dewan-Herrick. I'm a psychotherapist and life coach with over 40 years of experience. And in this video, what I want to do is address the question, what is the point of personal development? My aim is to help you think about and connect to whatever motivations you might have for personal development. If you're watching this video, I assume you're interested in personal development. Perhaps you have a lot of information about the what and the how questions that can pertain to personal development. What is it about? What areas do you focus on? How is about the practices and the disciplines that you engage in order to develop. But I find that if there's not an answer to the why question, the what and the how answers are not going to take us very far. We're not going to engage. So please stick with me. I hope to provide you with a way to really connect with your deepest sense of motivation for taking this personal development journey. I'm not going to provide answers, but what I am going to do is provide some reference points for you to connect with your own motivation. And after many years of supporting people in their personal development, 4 major sources of motivation seem clear to me. I'm going to name these 4 and then I'll talk more about them. And I name them this way. The first one I call escaping hell. The second one I call becoming someone. The third one I call building paradise. And the fourth one I call service. These are 4 main sources of motivation. I tend to see them in a developmental sequence. The earlier ones seem to be a motivation at first, and then the latter ones emerge. However, it's not that neat and tidy. They overlap. Sometimes they're happening simultaneously. We can have one day where we're motivated by one and another day where we're motivated by another. So keep that in mind. So let's start with escaping hell. When we experience unbearable pain, we're motivated to do something about it, to change something about ourselves or something about our circumstances. The pain is so great that we feel we have to do something about it. And there's so many sources of pain in life. There's physical pain, psychological, emotional pain. We have pain in relationships. We can be in toxic, conflictual relationships. We might be in a meaningless, soul-destroying job. We may have an illness. There's a lot of things that are sources of pain for us. Pain, anxiety, extreme loneliness. When you add a few of these together, life can feel so painful that it seems we only have 2 options. One is to do something about it, to relieve that pain, and the other is to kill ourselves, to commit suicide. It comes down to that. So this is a very fundamental source of motivation. As I describe each of these sources of motivation, I will be providing some questions that you can ask yourself to get to the bottom of whether this is important for you. And I would suggest that you write these down and later go off and do some journaling about them. Explore your answers to these questions. So you could ask yourself, for escaping hell, what is most painful to me in my life? There may be more than one thing. You can write these things down. What are external circumstances? Your financial situation, your living situation, or internal realities, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. Write them down and then give them a number, a scale from 1 to 10. How painful they are to you. 10 would be extremely painful. And then think about how strongly you feel you need to change something to relieve this pain. And you could go through each one and give that a number from 1 to 10. That will give you some sense of your motivation to escape hell. The next source of motivation I call becoming someone. Once we've relieved some of the most acute pain we have, we might turn our attention to this nagging feeling that we're just not good enough. We have flaws and problems and issues that aren't resolved, and we aspire to the ideal that we want to be in terms of who we want to be and how we want to be in the world. And that's for ourselves, but we also measure ourselves against other people, and we are preoccupied with what other people think of us, whether other people value us, whether they respect us, even admire us. Part of our motivation can be to be valued and recognized by others. I think of the Tracy Chapman song from many years ago called Fast Car. She has a line in there where she says, "Maybe I could be someone." We'd like to be someone. We'd like to attain the ideal of who we want to be. To get a sense of whether this is a motivation for you, you can journal and ask the questions, what don't I like about myself? What don't I like about my appearance? What don't I like about my behavior? What don't I like about the way I am in the world? How would I change that? What's the ideal that I would have for myself in these different areas? And you can give yourself a scaling number for how important each of these things are, and then feel into yourself about how much you'd like to change that, how important it would be for you to change that. Okay, let's move on. The third source of motivation I call building paradise. So once we've eased some of the worst pain we have, and we begin to develop a little confidence, some belief in ourselves, some sense of self-esteem, we can set our sight on something bigger. We can set our sights on the life we want to create. What does that look like? What does that look like? What do we want in our lives? This can include our finances, how much money we want, how much wealth we want, what kind of property we want, what kind of home we want, what kind of relationships we want, how do we want our bodies to be, how fit, for instance, do we want to be, what weight do we want to be. We just create an image of the life that we'd like to create for ourselves. In order to assess to what degree this is a motivation for you, you can journal once again and ask yourself the questions, what are these elements for my particular version of paradise? Your paradise might not require that you be rich. If it isn't that, then what is it? What is the ideal life and lifestyle that you want to have for yourself? Again, ask these questions and answer them in a journal where you identify each element and not only name them, but pause each time you think of something and feel into it. How really important is this to you? Do you really have a desire for it? Or is it just what you think you're supposed to want? Okay, so let's move on to the fourth, the final motivation that I'll talk about in this video, which is service. So once we've begun to accomplish the aspects or the things that we were motivated to accomplish up to this point, we began to look around and notice the world, notice the suffering in the world, and we may have some feeling of empathy for that, or some impulse to do something of benefit, to relieve the suffering we see in the world. Before I talk more about service being a source of motivation, I want to back up and talk a little bit more about becoming someone and building our paradise. And I want to use two metaphors to explore how we can get a bit stuck in those two forms of motivation. The metaphors are, one is an expensive and fancy car. The two is a bright and shiny set of tools. An expensive car. So we can acquire, if we can afford it, an expensive car. Maybe it's a Jaguar or a Bentley or a Maserati, whatever it is, and it's amazing and it looks great, and we wax it and we take care of it and we drive it around the block and we display it, and it becomes a status symbol, and it makes us feel good about ourselves, and it makes us at least imagine that other people may think highly of us. In terms of personal development, this is an aspect of both becoming someone and building a paradise. The interesting thing, though, is that as a vehicle, we don't use it to go very far. We drive it around locally. We show it off to those people who we know, who we want to see us in it. We don't take a road trip. We don't go on an exotic adventure. So it's the possibilities that it gives us are limited to satisfying these earlier motivations. A bright, shiny, brand new set of tools and a vast array of tools can be inspiring to have and to look at and to organize on our workbench in our workshop. And we can imagine the great things we could do with it. And when people come over and they see our tools, they could be impressed, and they can imagine all the great things we're doing with these tools. But the fact is, we're not doing much with them. They're for show. They're to make us feel good about possibilities, and they're to impress others with the possibilities for what we might do, but we don't do much with them. In terms of service being a motivation, and from the point of view of service, looking at this, it'd be much better to have a beat up old jalopy with windows that don't roll up and a noisy muffler, and actually take a trip, actually go someplace. That would be better than to have a Jaguar that sits in the driveway. Also, it would be better to have a limited set of rusty tools that you actually use to fix and build something with, than to have a great variety of shiny tools that lay idle. So when you begin to recognize that, when you begin to recognize that there may be something more that my personal development can move into, can do, is when service is woken up as a motivation. The urge to be of service, that motivation, can arise at any time. It can arise even when we're in the midst of excruciating pain. But my sense, my observations and personal experience is that it doesn't really become the center of gravity for us, and we can't really get traction in that area until we've made some progress along the way. In order to get a sense of to what degree the motivation of service is important to you, I propose the following questions that you can journal about. What do you have a passionate interest in? What is it beyond yourself that you love and care about? What is it that when you do it, you lose a sense of time and you forget about yourself? What is it in the world that seems to be creating pain and suffering for people? To what degree do you care about that? To what degree do you feel empathy for those who suffer? To what degree do you have an impulse to do something about that? And again, you can use scaling numbers for this. How much you care about it and how much you have an impulse to do something to relieve that suffering, from 1 to 10. So having presented each of these areas of motivation, I want to say a little bit about the blind spot and the possible trap that each one entails. For escaping hell, a trap there is the belief that pain is the enemy, that it could be eliminated. It's the failure to recognize that life is inherently painful and to be caught in an endless pursuit of the relief of pain and suffering. Becoming someone. What's the blind spot there? If becoming someone is about becoming perfect, then we get stuck in an endless pursuit of that perfection and a sense of persistent shame about not being good enough in the world. Sure, it's good to have an ideal for ourselves and to incrementally move toward it, but if we need to be perfect, it's going to be a hard road, because we're all imperfect. We all have flaws and faults and issues and problems, and it will probably always be so. Also, if we need the validation from externally, from other people, we're going to be in an endless pursuit of getting that validation. What's the blind spot of building paradise? We can get caught in a cycle of wanting more and more, of it never being enough, of wanting our acquisitions to enhance our sense of self-esteem and our social standing, and it can be endless. It can be endless, and it can keep us blind to the world of suffering around us that we might do something about, and it can keep us locked into the cycle of acquisition and not turn the corner to generosity. That if we fill up our own vessel far enough and it begins to overflow, maybe we don't need a bigger vessel to hold it. Maybe what we need to do is give from the overflow, right? So being stuck in building our paradise can be an obstacle to moving forward to the satisfactions and the deeper sense of meaning that can come from being of service. Okay, so you might be saying, what's the blind spot? What's the downside? What's the trap of being of service? So far it might sound like I'm putting that at the pinnacle. That's the top. And if that's your motivation, that's where you should be. Well, it turns out, I think, that there's also a blind spot and a way to get stuck in service. A couple ways. One way is that if we haven't addressed our own pain, if we haven't worked on ourselves to make ourselves the best version of ourselves we can be, and if we haven't taken care of our material and our lifestyle needs, we may be applying ourselves to service in a way that actually harms us, keeps us from taking care of ourselves. In fact, leaves us with less to actually give. We're putting everybody else before ourselves so much that we're hurting ourselves. There's the thing that they tell you on an airplane, right? About emergency situations when the oxygen masks fall. Of course, we should put those on ourselves before we help other people. So service can be the failure to put on your oxygen mask yourself. The other blind spot, trap, I think, for service is when it becomes holier than thou. When being motivated by service and doing things of service becomes a kind of a virtue signaling game in which we see ourselves as morally superior, and we may look at people who are trying to escape hell and become somebody and create a paradise as morally inferior. People who are like that are annoying, are they not? Do you not agree? I think that's a trap. Well, I think that that's enough for now. I hope that I've been able to provide a way for you to think about and connect to and feel the sources of your own motivation, so that you have that drive in you to launch into your personal development in whatever fashion, whatever form it takes. Whatever your what and how answers say, maybe you have some fuel that will drive your efforts. Thanks for sticking with me to the end of this video. I appreciate it. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, leave me some comments, share the video with a friend, and you can check out my links below to my online store called Attention Bazaar, and also my website for my psychotherapy and life coaching practice, if you're interested in checking me out there. And until next time, may you find your motivation, may it fuel your path, and may you have success on your path. Bye for now.